Next question. Which statement about flex is false? Children of an element with display flex for flex items. Justified content can only be used to align along the axis that is horizontal. Line items can be used to align along the cross axis. Or D, flex is useful for arranging elements on the page. The correct answer for this one is B. So, flex can be kind of confusing sometimes, so I like to refer to this diagram. In general, the main axis is horizontal, but, and this is a very big but, it's not always going to be horizontal, right? So when we're using flex direction, by default, this is set to row. So you can see our flex items are side by side. They're sitting right next to each other. They're friends. They're having fun. But let's say instead of flex direction row, we change that to column. Now all of a sudden we're stacking our friends on top of each other. They're like, oh, I don't like this as much. And in effect, we're rotating our main axis. We're saying our main axis is now up and down, and our cross axis is now across. So justified content and main axis work together, right? So justified content will align those items along the main axis, but the main axis is not just horizontal, it can be vertical as well. Children of an element with display flex or flex items, that's just true. Yeah, so that's just true. C, align items can be used to align along the cross axis. Yes, just like how justified content and main axis, sort of think of them working together. Line items and cross axis are together, so that's also true. And flex is useful for arranging elements on the page. That is true as well. I like using flex. Flex is very helpful. All right, next question. This one kind of goes off of what we were just talking about. When we use flex direction column in our CSS, what happens? A, the main axis becomes vertical, or B, the main axis becomes horizontal. Think about what we just talked about. And that is correct. The main axis becomes vertical. So going back to that diagram again, by default, our flex direction is row. So they're right next to each other. They're in that row. But when we switch that to column, our main axis and our cross axis switch. And so that would be consistent with A. The main axis becomes vertical. What does 2 plus 4 evaluate to in JavaScript? A, 24, or B, 6? I know you want it to be 6. I want it to be 6 too. JavaScript is so weird, but the correct answer is 24. And you're probably like, what? That makes no sense. But if you pop open your console and you type that in, it'll say that. It'll say exactly that, 24. The reason has to do with string concatenation. So we're saying that our first element is a string. And when JavaScript evaluates this, that makes a lot of difference. That makes a lot of difference. So any normal person would see this symbol and they would say, oh, addition. Right, and they would see a 2, a plus sign, and a 4, and they would say, well, this is 6. But we're talking about computers here. Computers aren't normal. Computers are quirky. This computer thinks that this is a concatenation symbol. What that says is, since I've got a string on the left side of it, I'm just going to smash together whatever I have on the right side of the concatenation symbol. So it assumes that this is also a string, and it makes it 24. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's a little wild. It's strange to get used to, but yeah, concatenation exists in JavaScript. All right, next question. Why don't we use the HTML and star selectors in our CSS? A, it creates an error in the CSS. B, it applies styles to all elements, even ones that don't need it. Or C, it takes a lot of time to style everything. The correct answer is B. A is incorrect because, you can use HTML and the star selectors. It doesn't create an error. Those are perfectly valid selectors. C, takes a lot of time to style everything. with the speed of our internet these days, it doesn't really take that much time to style content in an HTML page. So yeah, the correct answer is B. Not just by process of elimination, but let's talk about it. So here I have some sample JavaScript that I just pulled from, I think I might have been like google.com or something. And you can see our HTML tag that contains all of the content. But what else is inside of that HTML tag? We also have the head tag, and the head tag doesn't have any content. It doesn't display any content. What it has is script tags, so it's adding JavaScript inside of that. And it has style, so it's adding in CSS. So why we don't want to be using HTML, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be styling these tags that aren't actually displaying content. We're basically over selecting. And this similar thing happens with that star selector. So in general, we want to avoid this. There are some occasions where the HTML selector can be useful, but in general, you want to be specific. You want to use IDs. You want to use classes. All right, next question. Which one is not a semantic tag? A, header, B, article, C, main, or D, div? The correct answer is D. And so when I see the word semantic, what this means to me is that it gives meaning, right? And another way you can think of this question is sort of like, which of these words actually have real English meanings to them, right? So like header, you can kind of think of that as like, oh, like the head of someone, or maybe they're heading a soccer ball. Oh man, that's like the worst soccer ball ever. But like this has some sort of semantic meaning to you. Article, that means something to you. Main, that means something to you. Div. Before I was in web dev, I had no idea what a div was. If you came up to me in the streets and you were like, what's a div? I'd be like, I have no idea. Also, who are you? Also, why are you in my personal space? You know, like div is not something that has semantic meaning. So semantic meanings, they kind of provide structure to your HTML, so anyone reading it can get more of an idea of what you're trying to build up. But they also give meaning, right? We've got this footer, we've got this header, the navigation, section aside, article, etc. All right, finishing it off with our last question. What is missing in this line of HTML? Image source equals dog.png. A, a class, B, an ID, C, an alt attribute, or D, a title? The correct answer is an alt attribute. So with the rest of these, you don't really need these for images, right? So it'd be perfectly fine for this image tag to not have a class or an ID or a title, but an alt attribute you must have in an image tag, right? In earlier websites, people would frequently just leave them off, because this is technically valid HTML, technically, in the most technical way possible. But what you're doing when you're leaving off the alt attribute is you're not being very welcoming to all users who might be seeing your website. So the alt attribute is the alt text. So some people, they have voice readers read out the content that's on a page. And so someone who's a sighted person, someone who can see, they might see this image and think to themselves, oh, it's a mountain with a sun. Maybe it's a moon. I can't really tell. But someone with a voice reader, if this is all that's in that HTML, they won't even know that that image is there because there's no alt tag to describe it. So we gotta pop in that alt tag so that people who use voice readers will also know, oh, there's an image, and that image is of two mountains and a sun, right? We're being inclusive when we include alt attributes. All right, that's the end of quiz 1. I'll probably make some more of these. Let me know what you like, what you don't like. Adios.